Welcome to The Explainer. So, when you hear the name Adam Smith, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's the invisible hand of the market, right? But here's the thing. The father of modern economics was actually a moral philosopher first, and his complete vision of the world is so much richer and frankly more interesting than that one single phrase. Today, we're going to dig into the whole story.
All right, so let's get right into the core puzzle Adam Smith was trying to solve. You have to remember, in his time, the 18th century, the old world of kings and lords telling everyone what to do was starting to crumble. So the big question was, if we're all free to just chase our own self-interest, what stops the whole thing from just descending into chaos?
Now, what's really fascinating is that years before he ever wrote a word about economics, Smith published a book with his first answer to that huge question. And you might be surprised to hear it had absolutely nothing to do with markets or money. He basically argued that the social glue holding everything together wasn't some law handed down from a king, but a force that grows inside each of us. And this wasn't some divinely inspired morality. No, it was something we learn from the moment we're born, from our interactions with each other.
And he had a special name for this key human ability: sympathy. Now, he argued this isn't an instinct we're born with. Instead, it's a product of our social education. Our family, our neighbors, the community around us, they all teach us how to imagine ourselves in someone else's shoes.
And this ability to sympathize helps us build something really cool that Smith called the impartial spectator. Just think of it like your conscience, that little voice in your head that's always asking, what would other people think if I did this? It's this inner referee that keeps our raw self-interest in check, because deep down, we crave the approval of others, and just as important, we want to be able to approve of ourselves. And here's the kicker. This is where Smith first used his famous invisible hand metaphor. And guess what? It had nothing to do with the market. He was talking about how our shared moral feelings, our sympathy, guide us to act in ways that create fairness and hold society together, almost as if an invisible force were at work.
Okay, so fast forward 12 years. Smith has laid this whole moral groundwork, and now he's ready to build his masterpiece on top of it, The Wealth of Nations. And get this, it was published in 1776, the very same year as the American Declaration of Independence. A big year for big ideas.
So because Smith felt he'd already figured out the moral bedrock of society, he could then move on to explaining the incredible economic engine that could run on top of that foundation. He was describing a system that could create unbelievable wealth, all without some central planner calling all the shots.
So this is the invisible hand most of us know about, but you have to look closely at how it actually works. Step 1, self-interest. That's just the fuel in the tank. Step 2 is where the magic really happens. Competition. That's the steering wheel, right? If a baker charges way too much for bread, you'll just go to the baker across the street. If a factory owner pays his workers too little, they'll leave for a better paying job. Competition is the regulator that channels greed into something good for society.
And this famous quote just nails it. We don't rely on the baker being a nice guy to get our bread. We rely on him wanting to make a living. We appeal to his self-interest. The market then creates this amazing situation where for him to get what he wants, our money, he has to give us what we want, our dinner.
But Smith didn't just explain how this system holds together. He also revealed the secret to its mind-blowing ability to generate wealth, and he used a really simple, everyday example to do it.
The secret sauce? It's called the division of labor. It sounds a little academic, but the idea is super simple. Instead of one person doing a whole job from start to finish, you break it down into tiny, specialized steps. To show just how powerful this is, Smith takes us inside a humble little pin factory.
So just imagine making a pin. You have to draw out the wire, straighten it, cut it, sharpen the point, grind the top to put the head on. There are a ton of steps. Smith figured that one worker doing all of that alone would be lucky to make maybe 20 pins in an entire day.
But what if you have 10 workers, and each one just does one of those little jobs over and over? One person only draweth the wire, another only straightens it, a third only cuts it. By specializing, Smith calculated that this small team could produce over 48,000 pins a day. That's 4,800 pins per worker. This massive jump in productivity, this is the engine of economic growth.
So you'd think this growth engine would just keep accelerating forever, right? Unstoppable. Well, here's another classic Adam Smith surprise. His answer was no. He didn't think it could.
He saw a natural life cycle for an economy. It starts with investment and growth. But as a country gets richer, more and more capital gets built up, and more producers jump into the game. This ramps up competition. And all that competition is great for regular people. It pushes prices down and wages up. But for the business owners, it squeezes their profits, and profit is the whole reason they invest in the first place. Eventually, Smith theorized an economy would reach what he called the stationary state. Now, this isn't some terrible collapse. Think of it more like economic maturity. The country has all the wealth it can reasonably produce. Profits are so low that there's no real incentive for big new investments. The frantic race for growth is over, and the economy just kind of cruises along, maintaining itself. So you see, to really understand Adam Smith, you have to put these two huge ideas together. The theory of moral sentiments is all about the internal software, our conscience, the social glue that makes us decent people. The wealth of nations is about the external hardware, the economic engine that creates prosperity. The two are meant to work together, hand in glove.
And this really is the crucial takeaway. Smith's powerful economic engine was never designed to operate in a vacuum. It was built on the assumption that it would be used by people who already had a moral foundation. The self-interest of the butcher and the baker is held in check not just by competition, but by their own internal impartial spectator.
And this leaves us with a final, provocative thought that connects Smith's 18th century world directly to our own. He gave us the blueprint for this incredible engine of capitalism, but he also warned us about the moral foundation it absolutely has to rest on. Which leads to the big question for us today. What happens to that engine if the foundation it was built on begins to crack?